what I'm doing today is not the easiest of the designs that I'm planning. It's just one to give me some practice and the opportunity for you to see me and to check out how you're all working on Zoom. So I'm going to do something using flowers from my garden, and I did have to be honest and say I took these from my neighbor's garden because I thought they were kind of pretty and fun. And, you know, so what I want to do, and I'll go into a little more detail on Tuesday, I started out with this container, but probably most everyone has a container like this. And I'm bringing it over here because there's another camera over here. And this one could be used as well. And what I've put on top of it is a tape grid. And you just take clear tape and you go across and then you make a grid. And then be sure to put a piece around here to hold everything together. So that's all done. There's water in here. And then I'm going to start with some greens. And this is, and like I said, these have all come from my yard. And I am hoping that you all have wonderful plant material in your yard to choose from. And this is something called leucothoi. It is a wonder plant. I'm inserting it in the middle between the holes in the grid. The deer don't like to eat this. It grows in the shade. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this plant, unless you like a lot of flowers, and there are not many flowers on this. It does have kind of a fluorescence in the spring. And as you'll see, this is going to be an all-around design. So I'm designing on a Lazy Susan, which, yes, you still can buy those. They still have them in various stores. And I'm caught up in my tape. And so that in general, when you're working with a design, you should have probably 1.5 times the quantity of flowers as you do a vase. And you can break those rules, but that's just kind of a rule of thumb. And the height should be 1.5 times the height of the container. In this case, I'm thinking more of something that would go on to a table, like a centerpiece. And so it's a little bit shorter than that. So I've put my greens around. I'm kind of have just defined. I've just defined, and you want to be sure that the green goes into the water, and it will later on, if it hasn't already. I want to define kind of the size of my design, which is going to be rather large, and for a table, for a centerpiece. Might be a little too high, because this is the rule of thumb for a centerpiece. And these are zinnias. I've never really grown this type before, but I love it. I'm going to collect the seeds and design and use them again next year. They're large flowered, and so I'm putting them down low in the design. And I don't want them to all be in exactly the same place, nor do I want them to all be the same height. The reason that your designs are going to look special and different is because they're not FTD. They're not square. They're not following kind of pack it in, fill it up as much as you can kind of rules. But I'm not doing this in a way that is formulaic. That's why I have so many flowers here, and sometimes it's hard to decide which flowers to use next. But what I'm going to use next, I think, is this celosia and that coxcomb. You probably see the red variety growing alongside the road. And it's quite interesting. Sometimes it can get quite large. And so I'm going to put that in the center. It will give some stability to the design because, as you probably noticed, things were moving around a little bit before, and they're still going to be moving around until I get more of my plant material in this. It probably takes, I don't know, 30 to 40 stems, which may seem like a lot, but if you start going around your yard, you'll find ferns, you'll find seed pods, you'll find all kinds of things to work with. And as you noticed, maybe, if you're watching closely, these moved, but they'll stay eventually. I promise. So now I'm going to work with, I'm going to add a couple more. No, I think I'm going to put these yellow flowers in. These also came from my yard. They're called, they're a type of sunflower, and they're quite tall right now, but they have some nice drape to them. So I'm going to put them around. I'm going to put some up a little bit higher. And I don't want them to all be at the same height because that's boring. The other thing that you'll find is maybe you'll put something in place and you won't like it when the design is a little more complex. I love this little bud, so I'm going to put the bud in too. That helps to give it stability. If you find that it's not exactly what you want afterwards, rather than trying to pull something out, the best thing to do is just cut it out. Then you're not disturbing the rest of the flowers, and it's just a lot easier. Okay, now if you have questions, I can't hear you, nor can I see you. But there is a chat capability, and hopefully that was explained to you so that you can send your chat questions in. And of course, this is a practice, so I don't have to answer them, nor do they have to be real questions if you don't want them to be. But it's just an opportunity for you to practice how to send in questions. This is another zinnia. I actually went kind of crazy when I ordered zinnias this year, and I ended up with 5 packages of zinnias, which I grew. And this little one is called Oklahoma Blend, I think. And it's quite different than that first one I put up. But again, it's something that's, you know, it's interesting and different. You're not going to see these in any of your FTD flowers. And if you don't have a lot of flowers, one could argue you could stop now. I tend to be a minimalist, which you're not going to see in this particular design. However, if you wanted to stop now, you could. If that's all the flowers you had, you could stop. And we just add a couple of finishing things. See, they're standing up straight now. So what I'm going to add now are some of the finer stemmed flowers. And this, I have like a little meadow where I grow milkweed for the monarch butterflies. And I think this is Timothy grass. I'm not really sure, but it's kind of pretty if it's in a big bunch like that. But I can also put it in and make it taller. Now see, that didn't stay, and so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to find something else to put next to it to try and get it to stay up taller. And this is called the obedient plant. It's also called Physotesia. And I think I may only have one of these. I'm cutting this on an angle, and I should have said that in the beginning, but I'm a little nervous, so things are not flowing exactly as I would like them to. But hopefully you're taking notes and you can refer later. I also have here Eupatorium. And going back to the monarchs, monarchs love having nectar plants. And this is a nectar plant. It's a terribly aggressive plant. And so at the end of each season, I cut it back with my shovel dramatically, trying to keep it at bay. And let's see, what else should I be telling you? I'm using this as kind of a filler right now, the Eupatorium. It's in the Joe Pye weed, in case you're wondering. And as with any spring, fall meadow, you see lots of different plant material together. You see lots of color. It should be kind of exuberant, actually. And I hope you're feeling exuberant watching this. And it looks like I've got way too many flowers, but oh well, I'll give them away to somebody. Too bad you're not here. You could be the somebody, but I'll have to find somebody else. Julie just said she's here. So the flowers are taken care of. And that's a good thing. I hate to have flowers that aren't being loved and used and enjoyed. And that's one of the reasons that I think this is a great arrangement. Even if you don't have a lot of flowers, you can make something like this. It's fairly easy. This is Japanese fern, painted Japanese fern. It just gives a little bit of green to it, to the arrangement, softens it. I'm putting it in last because it's fairly delicate. You can ask me a question. Go ahead.
Can you touch upon the water versus oasis?
Oh, yes, I can. And I'll do that again on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Oasis has been around for a long time, but back in the beginning of flower arranging, well, maybe not the very beginning, but when my mother was arranging flowers, she used to use chicken wire. Remember the chicken wire that you'd bend into like a ball and you'd stick it into a design? Well, that has come back. And as that has come back, somebody has noticed that Oasis, or they've been talking about the fact that Oasis is not biodegradable. And it also has formaldehyde in it. So it's really not a great thing for us to be using and putting into landfills. So there is a big movement going towards this tape grid, which I showed you today, and also chicken wire or floral mesh, and then also there's something called the Holly Chappelle pillow, but you can make that out of chicken wire. Now, as far as what is better for flowers, in general, flowers last longer in water than they do in Oasis. Oasis, kind of clogs, eventually will clog up Oasis will eventually clog up the stems of the flowers, and so the flowers drink better from pure water than they do from Oasis. I think Oasis is one of the things that the floral industry gave to us, partly because it makes transportation easy. If I were to take this and move it, well, it's not bad, very far, it would flop around. FTD doesn't want anything to flop around at all. They just want it to stay in place, and so Oasis is perfect for that. If you can, you're better off using this tape grid or anything else other than Oasis. There's one other thing. Oasis has come out with and I don't have it with me today. Oasis has come out with a black midnight Oasis. It's a little more expensive, but it is biodegradable. However, it's biodegradable in 576 days, but that's better than nothing. These are, I'm adding texture. It's the fronds from, I think it's cinnamon fern, that also grows in my yard. And it's just a little accent, a little bit different. So, I don't know how long I've talked.
Like 18 minutes.
18 minutes, which might be long enough. So, and I think the design as it is, although I should have put this in, but I can do that another time.
It looks beautiful.
Good.
It really does.
Good. Are there questions?
Are you ready for questions?
Sure, I'm ready for questions.
Okay, well, I have a question. I know that in the handout that we're giving out, you said to hide, you can hide the mechanics with what, though? And also no leaves in the water, right? So
yes.
What do you suggest to hide the mechanics with?
Okay. The mechanics, there are many different kinds of mechanics, and I'll be talking about that more on Tuesday. So for instance, and one of the simple designs that I'll be doing, you can use a pin holder. The pin holders were something that's been around actually that's probably was around even before chicken wire. This came out of the Chinese and Japanese ikebana. And so if you're using this, you don't want to see this. And so you can cover it with stones. I have lots of favorite stones that I use. There are lots of colored stones you can buy. In this case, the mechanics are covered by the flowers. I mean, I really didn't do anything, and you'd be hard-pressed to find the actual mechanics here. And there must be other things to do with the cover. Oh, you can put bark chips over it. Sometimes I've done creative designs where I've had oasis that I've then covered with bark because that was kind of the mood. It might have been rustic, similar to this. And so the bark worked, or sand. And that's about it. You just don't want people to see how you're holding the flowers together. It gives you something to talk about at dinner if you run out of anything else.
Perfect. And Cathy, Susan was wondering if you put anything in the water to help preserve the flowers?
I did. Florists do. It took me a long time before I started using a chemical that the floral trade uses, and it's available. It's what you get in those little packets. It's basically an antibacterial agent, and it does have some food in it for the flowers. And so I pre-mix that in here, and it does seem to make flowers last quite a bit longer. So I would recommend doing it, but if you're using it, be sure to follow the directions. Not all packets are the same size. Sometimes you need 2 packets for this amount. Sometimes you only need 1.
Perfect. And Susan was also wondering if the Black Oasis was completely chemical-free?
I would say probably not. It doesn't have formaldehyde in it. It is black, so it's colored, and it is kind of a foam, so I'm pretty sure it's not chemical-free. It's just better. If you want chemical-free or chemical-less, we have this tape. Of course, that's not chemical-free either. You could use chicken wire, and that's not chemical-free either, but they both have reduced the carbon footprint, I think. Okay, and one other thing was, and I'll talk about this on Tuesday also. Normally, the flowers that I buy go to your club, and then you auction them off or give them away or something. And I have bought flowers for next week. And one of the new techniques that I'm going to talk about and use is something called the U-glue. Let's see. Yeah, we call them U-glue. It's made by Oasis, and the brand name is U-glue. And it comes in a long strip. You can buy it at a wholesaler. You can buy it in small packages at places like Michael's. But what I've decided to do, since you're not taking flowers away, is I've given a box of this to Julie, who's going to take back to the club and decide how to distribute it. It's very easy to cut it, and everyone can take some home and use it. When you see each other, you can take it home. And I'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of that next week.
Okay, perfect. And then Connie had a 2-part question. I guess it kind of rolls together. It says, can you discuss how you approach the structure of the display? And then how do you know how tall a flower should be before you put it in the vase?
Too bad we didn't have a workshop. You guys have really good questions. The structure. Well, the structure depends on what you're going to do with it. I think this could, rule of thumb, go into, on a centerpiece, or it could be on a buffet table. If it was a buffet table that was twice as long as this, I would probably make it twice as long. Probably still keep it maybe just a little bit higher. And sometimes, most of the time, the container defines the structure. Usually, when you start building things, you usually start with line material to kind of define the structure. That would typically be wood or branches or something like that. And I did start with the Leucothea to kind of define it this time. As far as the height, I should have showed you that. I know it looked like I was winging this, but I actually have done this design before, so it's not really winging it. But if, for instance, I want this flower to stand right here, what I'll do is put the bloom on the ground, and I'll eyeball where my finger is, and then I'll cut it on an angle, more surface area for the water to come in, and then I would put it here, and it should go exactly where I wanted it to go, but it's hitting the tape. That's okay. Okay, so you can do that, and it's really pretty safe. If you're going into Oasis, you just have to remember to add about 2 inches for the amount that it's going into the Oasis. Okay.
And you mentioned the mistake that you don't want in, so you would just cut it like, the stem will stay in, but the flower will be cut off, right?
Right. So if I look at right here, I've got 3 flowers that are the same right in a row, and everything else is kind of intermixed back and forth. And so I was not sure when I put this in whether I wanted to do it this way, but what I'm going to do is take out the middle bloom, and rather than pulling it out I think there are actually 2 stems here. I'm just going to cut it down a little bit, and I'm using lighter, smaller scissors than I was using before. And it just gives it more space and it opens it up. Whereas if I had taken this out, everything would have shaken and it would have, start over again. Don't need to do that. Okay.
We do have one more question if we have time for one more question.
I do.
Linda was wondering if you could talk about conditioning supermarket flowers before you arrange them.
Okay. All flowers need to be, these are really good questions. All flowers need to be conditioned, including the ones that are freshly cut outside. And supermarket flowers, same as these, need to be cut on the bottom and put into water or water with flower food in it. They need to be cut on an angle and go immediately into water. You have 5 minutes approximately before that cut will seal. So if you buy flowers at the grocery store, you bring them home and you think, I'm going to make an arrangement, wrong. They've been out of water for probably 20 minutes, a half an hour, depending on where you're shopping. And you put them into water, they look fine, that morning. By night, they're all hanging, and you wonder, not all of them, many of them, and you're wondering what is going wrong. Well, you didn't condition them. Normally, you take them home or take them from your garden, you cut, you put into 2 or 3 inches of water. There are different camps on whether it should be warm water or cold water, but at least get them into water and let them rehydrate for 20 minutes or so. 2 hours probably, 1 to 2 hours. The exception, well, not exceptions, but special plants, flowers to consider are roses and hydrangea. The roses should be cut underwater on an angle and then immediately put into the water. Hydrangeas need something to help them absorb water, so you cut them and you put them into alum. Florists have something else, but alum, it's a pickling spice, I believe, and that helps them draw water, and then you put them into the water and let them condition. I must admit that alum works well for me, but I think even more importantly, I think the floral industry has come a long way with hydrangeas. I've had hydrangeas that were properly conditioned that lasted, 2.5 weeks. So the days of immediately flopping hydrangeas should be gone, but they do need to be properly hydrated.